off with Carri. So Carri Munden is a designer, creative director and stylist working across fashion, music and digital art. And so Carri, really thought I'd just start off by asking you just to kind of trace your career, like how you got in, how you got into fashion. But actually perhaps even like go further back, when you first realized that fashion was going to be a big part of your life, and then how you got into it, and then just bring us up to the present day.
Okay, rewind right back. I didn't always know I was going to do fashion. That was actually not really until my late teens, but I've always been interested in the arts and music and culture, and I guess even before I knew really what fashion was, I was interested in the way that people communicated through clothing, whether that's expressing their personality, or like a tribe that they belong to. So I think even though I didn't have words for it, I was interested in it at a really young age. And then as a teenager, I did GCSE arts and history of art, and then in my A levels, I realised that fashion was a thing and I could study it.
So, and why did you not know that fashion was really a thing before then?
Well, I grew up like in a small village, and I mean, I got like, I don't know, I went to Clothes Show Live, and but I knew like about brands and designers and things. I actually did work experience when I was I guess I was about 15 and got the train up to Red or Dead. Okay. And I think actually that was really groundbreaking for me, because I think before, the world of fashion just seemed like, like Paris and all these brands, and it seemed very unattainable. And then when I went to Red or Dead, I realized, oh, these are like normal people and like nice people, and like they're into cool music. And it was like, I don't know, then I kind of connected with it a bit more. And then it wasn't just for like rich people or like the elite, or so then I guess that was the turning point.
Yeah, no, I'm always so interested in the point when creative people realize that this particular practice, that they can make a living from it, when it's actually
but I couldn't study fashion in my school. We didn't do any sort of fashion or textiles or anything like that. So in my A levels, I started to bring it into my art course, but there wasn't in particular, I wasn't taught it.
And this kind of idea that fashion should be for everybody and be more inclusive, is that something that you feel like you've brought into your practice?
I hope so. That's definitely been I guess a goal. Yeah. And I feel really lucky that although I was showing London Fashion Week, and I was a luxury brand, but through the collaborations that I did, I could reach a much bigger audience, and that's always what I wanted. So yeah.
Interesting. And what were the collaborations that you did that helped you?
I did a lot, but like the main ones, I worked with a lot of Japanese brands actually, because my biggest market was Japan and Korea. So I worked with quite a few Japanese brands, but then the big ones were Nike, Stussy and Swatch. So I got to, they were like my dream collaborations as well. Like that was my
amazing
on my list.
Yeah. And more recently, Carri, how would you describe like where your career is at right now, particularly after the last kind of couple of years?
So since I stopped my brand, I've been freelance. So that works a lot better for me. I like the flow of it and doing lots of different projects. I'm working with lots of different people, and I work from home a lot as well. So yeah, I do. Actually, after my brand, I fell back into doing styling, because I did styling before when I was studying. Worked at magazines and did lots of editorial shoots, and then started working in and then I fell into that. So I was doing styling. So music videos, ad campaigns and things like that, and then creative direction for music as well. So a lot of music stuff actually, but I think there's so much overlap with fashion that it's,
I think, Carri, I think that you were part of that really exciting new wave that was bringing sort of popular, I wouldn't call it street culture exactly, but popular culture pop culture into fashion design, and there was a lot of sort of computer graphics and all of those sort of strands of popular culture, nightclubbing and everything that really, I think, you were pulling those all together and presenting them as fashion, which was a really exciting time. I remember it well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah, geeks. You don't really think of geeks and nerds in fashion, but like I'm a massive geek, so like I was bringing in those elements and those cultures.
And it's interesting because of what you were saying about Paris as well, and fashion being for the elite. There was that, I felt that it was, I mean, obviously sort of from magazines like ID and what have you, and Dazed, we've always had that pop culture leaning into fashion. But I think that was what was so lovely about what you and Henry Holland and lots of designers were doing, which was bringing that sort of, I suppose it's a word that wasn't used then, but that diversity into being fashionable and stylish. Like you say, geeks can be fashionable too.
Yeah, and I mean, I do feel like the fashion world, it actually extracts a lot from geeks, and it also extracts a lot from queer culture. Do you actually feel like that is reciprocated? Like, does the fashion industry give back?
Who are you asking?
Carri for now.
I guess there's lots of opportunities within the industry, but I think I don't think there's enough recognition of the underground culture. And yeah.
I think the queer culture is very strong behind the scenes. But if it gets into the sort of marketing and promotional side, it's much more about sort of titillation and queer baiting rather than actually queer approving, I would say.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Piers. Actually, I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that for anyone who's just joined us. Piers is a milliner and also teaches fashion styling and communication in Kent. So please do talk a bit more about that, because I really want to unpick that.
Well, that's quite a deep one, isn't it? Because I think, and I can only talk from a gay male perspective, but I would have said in fashion, there's sort of quite a lot of, there's the bigger brands would definitely queer bait in terms of having all those sort of, all the Dolce & Gabbana adverts that had all those boys sort of lounging around on sofas together, or 3 girls and 1 boy, or sort of bisexual stories. Maybe when was that, 5 or 6 years ago? And so I think it's sort of that relates a bit to almost that sort of fear of coming out in a way. It's sort of like you can be maybe enticed or lured by that poster, but it's not overtly saying gay's okay. But I think, if you're actually working in fashion rather than a consumer or an observer of fashion, so the gay thing or diversity, whatever, all of the sort of variants of being a human being are very embraced in fashion. It's very important. You look at that front row or behind the scene, and even now a little bit on runways, you see diversity. But the bigger brands and sort of the fashion industry, that kind of type that Carri was talking about, the Paris and Italian and New York, it doesn't feel very diverse to me at all. Certainly not queer.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Lolo, my friend Lolo is a transdisciplinary artist and ex-fashion industry person. I'm sure you have an opinion on that, do you? How do you feel about how the fashion industry treats the queer community?
I think talking about the fashion industry is difficult because there's so many parts of it. Like there's so many kind of facets and levels and ways of existing in it. Like you have the kind of, obviously that I suppose the most kind of binary is like high fashion luxury, and then subcultural streetwear, or like students coming out of the art schools and doing their first collections, and everything really feeds into each other. There's a huge amount of queer people in the industry, and definitely a lot of what you see, I think, in the industry is queer generated, but it's still essentially services like a heteronormative audience. So then, like Piers was saying about the advertising, you then this kind of homoeroticism comes through, or this like extreme fetish and even misogyny is really rife kind of in the ideals around beauty that are sort of really kind of forced upon for everybody. So I think there's a danger around like the advertising sort of hyper consumption side of it, which is tied into these like extreme ideals of beauty. And in terms of like it being super queer, yeah, I guess there's people still queering fashion, definitely. Lots of designers really queer it and queer fashion history. But the kind of big brands, it's all so much about money and commerce that it's kind of borrows and steals from culture, I suppose.
Do you think that comes from marketing sort of trying to ramp up people's insecurities? So sort of, and trying to sell, as you say, those hyper versions of femininity and hyper versions of masculinity. Whereas actually there's what I think all we do here, this sort of much more alternative group. And I think this is where fashion is changing so dramatically now, is that you have such a broad spectrum now in terms of Instagram and communication. Yeah. And I think that those, you say heteronormative brands, to me, they just feel so out of date now, which is positive. Anyone has got the same reach from their little Instagram posts. So some of these kids doing these amazing sort of looks and what have you at home have a huge following, which I think is really exciting. I find that a really exciting change in the industry.
I was just going to say that I do feel like hopefully it's a generational thing. And like you said, there's so much power now to the younger generation they have online, and now those brands have to change. Obviously they're changing in their marketing and but they need to change like internally as well, and that will start to happen. And so maybe we'll see a change.
I think the thing with the fashion industry is like there's not a problem with people's creativity. Like there's an abundance of amazing people producing brilliant stuff, but the industry's hard in itself to be sustainable and successful and manage your health, manage the account, manage the production, and it's so there are like people coming up and having, I don't know, it depends. It's like if you view kind of success as having however many thousand Instagram followers and whether that's turning into revenue that you can live on without being a influencer, but being an artist, you know, like having loads of followers through what you make as opposed to what you're trying to sell. And I think that's probably still a disconnect between a lot of creatives versus influencer business minded people. And then you've got this huge vast canyon before you get to luxury fashion, or you've got fast fashion, which is a whole nother part of the industry, which is the kind of other like monolith of the kind of economic side of it. And most people shop fast fashion essentially, like predominantly, which has its own host of problems. I always get really dystopian when I talk about fashion.
we'll get back onto fast fashion, but Julian, actually I should just introduce Julian for people that have just joined us. Julian Smith is a costume designer and pattern cutting tutor at Istituto Margate in London. Julian, I wanted to ask you how you felt as well about drag and how that, which is previously I think felt quite sacred and removed from the world of advertising and commerce, but has pretty recently started to be commodified, I think, in a pretty new way. How do you feel about
that? Well, I've just enjoyed making things in a bespoke way, like responding to a person's need for their performance performative self, their alter ego, and just getting into the spirit of what they're into. And then some of them have got a real sort of drive to look really fashiony, and others of them, there's much more play around the notion of taste, and like it can be quite bad, it can be quite trashy. Drag is obviously a bit, you know, plays with all of that. And I just think that it's just risen in popularity so much over the last 5 years or more, you know, 5 to 8 years, maybe. It's just really risen in popularity. I mean, I guess that's to do with RuPaul, a large part. But does it have an effect on fashion? I don't know. Fashion's always sort of looked to decadence. So, but maybe now there's much more conversations around gender identity and sexuality becoming more broad, and self-expression becoming a bit more than staying in the confines of what fashion historically is regarded as tasteful, you know. And then that makes you think about elite, you know, a sort of elite European look. Particularly when I teach at Istituto Marangoni, there is this little bit of a house style which we're trying to dismantle a bit, but that's, you know, to do with Italian craft and refinement, and so we keep that there. But you know, it's time to start blurring with gender and being more extravagant with taste, I think.
I love the idea of dismantling a house style. I was wondering if you could just talk through your career a little bit, because obviously you did work at high fashion houses as well.
I did. I studied at Manchester Met Uni first in 1997, quite a while ago. And similar to Carri, fashion as a notion of studying it hadn't arrived to my head until I actually got into the university context. And I started doing fine art printmaking. So I was always interested in being artistic and drawing and these kind of things. And then I just heard that there was a place available on the fashion course. And I just went, I think I want to do this. And I didn't have a fashion portfolio at all. And I said, why don't you give me a go? Because I think I'll come with a fresh take on it. So I was very confident at that age. And then I went to Royal College of Art, and then I met Roland Murray, and I became his assistant for 2 to 3 years. And that got me into pattern cutting as a discipline, because I've always liked to design and create, make things. But in the fashion industry, I slotted into the role of pattern cutter quite well. I don't know what that's to do with, really. I was into Lego and Barbie dolls as a child. So
me too.
Yes, and Lego is very hands and construction, and Barbie dolls is the camp vision that we love as Gable.
I know Carri loves a bit of Lego.
Oh, I love Lego.
Yeah, made pieces out of Lego, made accessories. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do love the idea of, like, yes, your Lego and your Barbie being the essential toolkits of any future fashion industry success
Yeah.
story.
To me, they're about imagination, aren't they? They're both, you know, the doll becomes a canvas for one's imagination, and Lego is a tool for imagination. You can build your own things with it. But I think a lot of what we're talking about in this group is sort of being part of some sort of underground or minority or overlooked sector of society in some ways, or underrepresented, maybe not overlooked, but underrepresented sector of society. And maybe that's why so many of us go into the creative industries, because we imagine a better world, or a more relevant world, or a happier world for ourselves. I certainly know that that's what I did when I first came to London. I wanted to go somewhere where I could work and be accepted, and continue creating those sort of fantasies, I suppose. I was making with my sister's Barbie dolls, actually, Julian, and my Lego, you know, because I wasn't seeing it in popular
Yeah.
culture, really.
Yeah.
And that's the difference with now on Instagram.
Yeah.
And
Instagram
now,
is popular
now you
culture.
have Minecraft instead of Lego.
Yes. Yeah. And filters where we can all make ourselves the sort of ultimate whatever you want to be. Yeah.
Piers, after the Lego stage, can you just tell us a little bit about your career, how you got here?
Oh, it was terrible. I graduated from my degree in photography, and like the others here, I didn't think about fashion at all. I loved Vivienne Westwood and Jean-Paul Gaultier, probably because they were working with such theatrical kind of tropes in a way. But I then got a job at TK Maxx, which was monstrous. And in fact, it's relevant to this discussion. They were putting bets on as to whether I was gay or not. I remember I was very upset because I wasn't confident about myself at that part of my life. I was 24 or something. So where I really changed was moving to London, and I worked for an artist, Andrew Logan, who created this wonderful alternative Miss World competition, which is quite interesting. Julian, you're talking about the popularity of drag and RuPaul, which to me is actually a very conservative gender play.
Yeah.
But Andrew Logan's is you make yourself beautiful, whatever you are, whatever you started, whatever you become, you make yourself beautiful. And so I was his assistant on that. So Andrew Logan was my Roland Murray, and found a great role in the sort of alternative arty crowd, which is sort of really where I met Lolo and Carri, and going to nightclubs and sort of beginning to feel confident about who I was, I think, because I could in the workplace, instead of having to kind of really if people were putting bets on as to whether I was queer. I mean, now I'd laugh, but then I was devastated. But of course, when we work in the fields that we all work in, Anna, I know you work in journalism, and you're open-minded to meet everybody. You know, you're interested to meet and hear everybody's story. And I think that's the important thing for maybe people tuning in to watch this, is to kind of go and find somewhere where you feel safe, I think, which is really important.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly my, as a young, awkward, queer vicar's daughter in Belfast in the 90s, it was reading magazines that was this world of excitement and gloss. And I was like, these are my people. I was reading The Face. I was like, here are just cool people doing amazing things. I want to be part of this. I want to be a journalist. I want to help tell these stories. I want to be in these pages. So I really know what you mean about seeing the fashion world as a bit of a haven for I suppose, you know, most of us probably did feel like misfits at some point in our upbringing, or actually 20s and 30s.
Totally. And that's to do with everything from gender to race to religious background to your sexuality, and it's so encouraging to hear that those are all now important topics in. Well, you know, I teach in Kent, and Julian, you teach in London, and it's so important that those are actually all part of the curriculum nowadays. To sort of there's something about us all as young people imagining a different world, which I think which trained us to be creative and inventive, and maybe disruptive too. So I don't know if I could ever imagine a world where everyone is accepted right from. That would be wonderful. But then I wonder if you get the rebels as well. So I don't know. I'm not saying I think we should be suppressed, but there's a rebellious thing that I think all of us have here, which has pushed our particular sort of area in the industry forward, all of us here.
Yeah.
Do you mean like if you're not understood or there's challenges, actually it makes you stronger and kind of more, is that what you meant? Like that it's important in a way to sometimes to have something to sort of fight against?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
I think we've made positives out of that negative, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. So I don't know what would be better if we were all accepted point blank, which would be better really. But then, you know, you might have never put, was it Sonic the Hedgehog or someone down the catwalk, Carrie? I can't remember. It was a wonderful blue creature you put down the catwalk.
Yeah,
once.
it was Sonic. Yeah, I'm very shy and introverted, but like if someone tells me something no, then it makes me want to do it more. Like I want to prove to them that I can do it.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about like escapism as well. I know for me as a kid, like fashion and clothing, it wasn't really like the fashion industry. It was definitely like characters that I saw in films that were often quite like tragic women in massive dresses and huge hats and stuff, like full busts like heaving. And I think the sort of escapism that kind of costuming and imagery and that sort of scenic element of film and couture shows and was the kind of route out of being like other and odd and queer. And so, you know, there's this kind of sort of trajectory almost to like get into that world, to start making those things, to start kind of building and expressing these visions. And I think sometimes that gives you a route to like explore yourself. I think I was probably projecting myself onto clothing I made for other people for a long time, kind of creating my alter ego other on the people I was dressing. But yeah, definitely it was the kind of escapism that I needed that got me into it. But I studied, I'd always wanted to be a designer. It was like something I'd wanted to do from being a child, like creating these kind of, but more kind of for the character. And when I got to uni, I was not interested in collections at all. I just wanted to make like jumpsuits for Grace Jones. It was literally like, I want to do jumpsuits. I want to do stage wear, one-off pieces, just shit that looked like really hot for, yeah, Grace Jones, Eurythmics, Blondie. It was just all the kind of iconic women that I grew up loving, and actually got to do it as a career. Yeah,
well done, babe.
Unbelievable. I worked for Fee Doran, who was Mrs. Jones, when I was a student, and I stayed on for 2 years, and I basically hardly went into uni. I went to London College of Fashion and just was working at Mrs. Jones every day, helping her make costumes for pop stars and doing music videos and brand collabs with like Fred Perry and Rizzler and stuff. And just that's when I really like kind of learned that side of the trade. And then I learned pattern cutting a few years later.
She did that amazing JP jumpsuit for Kylie, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. The Kylie jumpsuit. Yeah, that was like her ultimate iconic
That really inspired me, actually.
Yeah, but it was
that was one of those moments, wasn't it? The white jumpsuit.
Yeah,
that really was a moment.
The videos by Dawn Shadforth, and I actually ended up working for Fee because there was a video talking about magazines. There's an amazing track called "Living in a Magazine," which is the name of my final collection, by a band called Zoot Woman, and the music video was by Dawn Shadforth, and it had Fee, Mrs. Jones styling it, and also who was Never Trust a Stylist, who was Kylie's stylist, Will Baker, had all these stylists on it, and it's just like the most amazing video, and it just like sealed the deal in terms of like knowing what I wanted to do. And then I went and worked with Dawn and Mrs. Jones and William Baker as well, actually, later on. So.
And can you talk a little bit more about what's where you've been since then?
Yeah, so I had got my big break living with Anna Trevelyan, who's like a massive stylist now, and we lived together when I was 26, and she had just come out of uni, and then she started working for Nicola Formichetti, who's another super duper massive art director, creative director and stylist, and they started commissioning me to make stuff. I was just making it in mine and my ex's bedroom, and then they started doing Gaga, and Nicola just got all us young designers to make Gaga stuff, and a load of us, I think, really shot through into this kind of whole nother stratosphere, because Gaga got so huge and she'd wear sort of 6 outfits a day. And that kind of launched my career, and I started doing collections, and I did for about 3 years. I was doing big commissions for big pop stars and collections, and then I started to kind of burn out and lose sight of what I was doing. And then I got into sustainable fashion and campaigning, and I started doing lots with waste, and I did that for like another 5 years. And then left London and have now I'm just finishing a fine art master's and working more just as an artist. I'd always done art alongside, and there's always this kind of conversation between the two, or tension, I don't know. And now I really understand my practice, but I understand so much of my fashion design from doing a master's about all this kind of the image projection and the sort of misogyny and the fetishism and the undertones and the sort of silenced gendered feminine and all these kind of things I was expressing through clothing, which are actually so entrenched in my identity and my gender identity, of my experience of that as a child and growing up. And I still make clothes for my work as well. So I'll make outfits for my portraits, because I do self-portraits predominantly. So they still inform each other. And I never really felt at home in the fashion industry. I felt a bit of an imposter, but kind of managed to still have a pretty major kind of 5 years.
Absolutely. I mean, I find that so interesting that actually through your MA in fine art, you sort of gained the vocabulary to understand and express, you know, your fashion career.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, you know, do you just wish that it was possible to gain those tools at the start? Do you think that's something that they should teach?
I guess it would be. Do you know what? It might really change clothes if it was taught. If kind of that kind of art theory thinking was taught while you were doing your fashion course, like if the two were really merged and not just kind of thinking about clothes as art, but really thinking about yourself, you know, your essence and your where you're coming from, but also you've got to live to realize that as well. Like, you know, you need something to look at and things to analyze to understand that that's going to happen. But yeah, it could be really interesting, but it could potentially change clothing.
I think it's quite a process, the fashion industry, though, isn't it? It has been for all of us here. You know, we've all done quite a lot in the industry, and then at some point it starts to take you on a journey that takes you away from your point, I think, because it becomes so complex. And it becomes a business, and wholesaling and ordering and networking, and it takes you away actually from creating. So I think it's something that is worth going on that journey, even though you kind of come out the other side sometimes feeling a bit, well, I don't know whether I'm quite out the other side, but sort of out the other side, feeling a bit like, oh my God, I'd hate to go back to how much I was producing 2 or 3 years ago. Horrible way of working. You know, all that boxing things up and getting the right size in the right bag. And then they got to a point now with buyers where the bigger buyers had these online systems where we had to type in all of our codes. You got to say percentages of whether it's silk or rayon or whatever, all of that. If it's got a feather on, you've got to have the Latin name of the bird and its provenance. And it's mega selling clothes to wholesale. But we then had to pay a monthly rental, a monthly kind of subscription fee to be able to log on to that shop's database, to put our data into their database so that they would then buy our clothes. And that was the last straw for me. I thought, I'm just selling.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I have to say that's the main reason why I wouldn't do a brand again, is production is just so incredibly stressful. And I'm so much happier designing like freelance for other people and letting them deal with all of that.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask each of you about disillusionment, because obviously, you know, when you've had a successful career, there have been moments of disillusion. And I know, Lola, like what you did with Disillusion about the fashion industry and the ethics involved is actually, you know, you really turned that into activism, and it sent you in a different direction. can you perhaps like kick off by talking about that, like how you became disillusioned and how that really impacted your practice and probably enhanced it?
Yeah, I guess it was through exhaustion and working so hard and so much and being like, to be feeling at like the top of my game, but essentially having no life, not sleeping at least 1 week of every month, having so much to pay for constantly, and then getting really lost in kind of my sort of purpose, what I was doing, what I was trying to say. And I guess I was getting further and further away from myself in that period, quite sort of dissociated, just became like a sort of machine of making. But yeah, and it was that thing of like, oh, you know, when you get to the place where you always wanted to be, and then you realize it's not that great, and you're like, oh, this is what it means to be at this place. So I've done something wrong, because I don't have loads of people doing it for me. Like, I'm still making all the clothes, I'm still doing literally everything. And then I just became really aware, I was sort of like unwinding over a period of time, and became really aware of like the frustration over sort of the obsolete nature of the amount of work that goes into collections, and then they have these kind of fleeting moments of existence, and then things kind of sit on the rail in plastic, these like beautiful clothes that have been so heavily worked, like print designs that have been laboured over, money spent on fabrics which have been like laboured over by people in other countries, and the amount of waste that was being produced. I had just like shelves and bags of fabric, and all the fabric had stories to it. And I think because I've just been really exploited, I just started to think about it. It just really opened my eyes up. I've been in this like tunnel vision, and then I was like, oh, I'm being exploited. And I was like, a few people introduced me to other things that were going on. Just through conversation, I realized, you know, how exploitative the industry is at large, especially with fast fashion. And I just thought I really need to, felt more like a return to self, was like use the practice, celebrate design in a different way, work with waste, get designers collaborating, raise money to try and help with the issues around fast fashion. And then I started a collective called the EMG Initiative, which ticked all those boxes. And then that's what I focused on for the next kind of few years.
Yeah, it's how long do you think the process took from like starting to feel like pretty disillusioned to acting on it, basically?
It was probably about 2 years. Yeah. So I call it, I mean, it was essentially a breakdown. I had a breakdown in my early 30s, and it was a sort of 2-year process, if I'm really honest about it. But it was really, it was sort of, it was horrible. But I did do constructive things with it on the other side, and I'm here now, so it's all good.
It's impossible really to look at, you know, seeing what you've done. It's impossible to get you where you are now without the disillusionment and a breakdown.
Part of the story.
Do any of the other, you know, do the rest of you have similar stories of a point when you just thought, actually things have to change, this is not working for me? Carri, you mentioned getting obviously, like, you know, stopping doing your own brands and the production side of things getting on top of you.
Well, I actually have I have ME, so I have like a chronic health condition, which I was diagnosed at 21. I had to take a year out from uni, and then I just kind of, I didn't really understand it, and I thought I could just kind of push through it. And you can't, I don't know, it's really hard to balance something like that in the fashion industry. It's just so non-stop, and especially having my own business. And I was like, I didn't have a partner or investment or anything like that. I was doing like everything, you know, I had a team, but I was, it's, you know, there's no days off. Like, so, and I was traveling a lot, which was absolutely awesome. Like, I had an amazing opportunities, amazing time, but I just physically couldn't do it anymore because of my condition. And that was actually a hard process to accept, because it was like, when I stopped the brand, it was like losing some of my identity, and how do I, like, I guess, rebuild that creative identity, and with, you know, and be creative, but without it damaging my physical health and also my mental health. I think it's interesting there's so much talk about mental health now, and but again, I feel like it's a lot of the time it's just like marketing. Like I think for a lot of, well, everyone that I know that's working in the industry, I don't think they feel supported, and if they are open about their mental health, or and the same with disability.
Yeah.
That's me on that.
I agree with you. I think it's mostly kind of lip service, isn't it? You're supposed, you're supposed to be able to talk about anxiety and depression and any health issues, but you're still not allowed any time off. your boss will still not understand if you need some time off.
So you still got to hit the deadline.
Exactly. And Julian, have you got a point in your career when you got disillusioned with something and ended up kind of moving on?
I think I had a few of these moments. So, well, my first moment was when I was working in a job in fashion with Roland, and then I was working with him 6 days a week, and I saw where that was going, and then I thought, no, I need to step out and do my own thing. And the label that I had in 2010 and 11, that kind of time, I think I was like very drawn to fashion and production and all that sort of thing, and having a label. But I think I tried to run before I could walk with it a little bit, and I recognized that. I sort of thought, ooh, okay, I'm not sure if I could handle all of this. It's like trying to do too many things, isn't it? You're trying to be the designer but also manage cash flow. I mean, like, there just wasn't that person at my side who could take that bit. So you end up, lugging loads of bags around and working all hours. So then I had a bit of a rethink then, and actually became a drag queen myself, because I think I needed some light relief at that point, and I can do some DJing.
Oh. If in doubt, become a drag queen.
Yeah, but I'll tell you where that idea came from as well, is that like I wanted to wear my own clothes, I wanted to be that person that dressed fabulously, and that was my version of sort of counteracting something about elitism. Maybe I was like trying to be a designer that was making luxury goods, and really that's not who I am, So then I started putting it on myself, and then it all became less about luxury and more about humor and just being vivacious, and that was a lot of light relief in that. But then again,
I also think, sorry, Julian, I also think it's cultural commentary. I think you're saying humor, but I also think you put a lot of cultural commentary into your work, same as Lolo. So it's not just drag. I think you're saying things as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then now, so I don't do drag quite so much now, but I really like to make for people who are really on the fringe, LGBTQ, plus size people, POC people who want to feel beautiful and need to feel beautiful in their unique way. So that's kind of where my work's gone now. I've always listened with like instinct, as in like, where's the better place for me at this point? Like, does this feel right? So I've had like mini moments of having to shift.
No, Lolo, I really noticed you nodding along when Julian was talking about ultimately realizing that he was serving and designing for people without feeling worthy of your own creations yourself, and actually thinking, I want to be the one dressing fabulously. Why am I dressing other people? Is that something that you think resonates for quite a few designers?
I don't know. I think I was really nodding when Julian said, like, you're making these kind of like luxury clothes for people, but it's not where you feel like it's essentially you. And I think I had that when I was making clothes for people, and which were these like kind of one-off, not couture, but like corseted gowns, and I was sleeping on the floor in my studio, and I was just like, this doesn't add up. and that's when I realized I had so much in common more with, you know, garment workers making in fast fashion, like, yeah. And that was one of the big kind of, you know, I had more in common with garment workers in Bangladesh than I had with my clients who I was making clothes for, which just sounds ridiculous and be like, you're a privileged white presenting man, whatever, but actually at that point that was my truth in the fashion industry, and that's what it is for so many people. And I think that's quite a kind of hard truth. But I think also with what you're saying about wanting to wear the clothes that you make, and I think a lot of that does come from, I suppose with all designers, but I think especially like queer men maybe making clothes for drag queens or for women, there's this escapist fantasy element which I do think comes from this kind of inner feminine, which is really oppressed in anyone male because it's feminine.
Yeah. Piers, have you ever thought, gosh, I want to be the one wearing the fabulous hat? So how have you felt a bit of a disconnect? Is it different actually that
you've worn all the hats?
Yeah. I do wear the hats, and I do a bit of sort of dressing up and drag as well. But I think hats are quite different in terms of they're a very different process, and they're one-offs anyway. And I think that the fashion industry tends to expect that fashion designers that all sort of come out of a mold in a way. So Carri, Lolo and Julian would all be expected to produce their collections in sort of whatever quantities anyone wanted at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
And that's sort of not really how it works, or how maybe you wanted to work, or you wanted to work, or you wanted to work.
Yeah.
Hats you have to make one by one anyway. I would sound quite similar to Carri in that I've really enjoyed all the opportunities and experiences and the people. I've met princesses and pop stars, and we even went off and got people who tarmac roads. We got them to spray our baseball caps one season, so sort of meeting everything, from the high and mighty to the hard grafters themselves. And I've really enjoyed all of that, but I don't want to go back into that very kind of fast London Fashion Week pace of it all. It's sort of quite, it's very hard business. And I think all of us here in this group are artistic at nature, artistic at heart. So that's sort of my disillusionment. I would say that it's not it looks like it's very artistic, but in reality it isn't very artistic. But what I do think is wonderful, that actually we've all sort of moved and shifted to whatever level to be true to our creative selves. So I make hats one by one, as I always have done, but I just don't put them in front of department stores anymore, and much happier in that way. But also I think I just really think that the younger, I don't know how many people are watching this and sort of where they're at in their own lives, but younger people thinking about moving into the fashion industry. Yes, there's work and better pay if you want to join a bigger brand, but if you want to get your own vision out there, which is what Julian's done, Carri and Lolo and myself have done, I think you can do that in a sort of much more independent way these days. Julian, when you first started, you couldn't have had a kind of network on Instagram as you do now. None of it, that wasn't there, was it? No. So we had to go through a series of editors and meetings with magazine journalists and maybe, be nice to Caroline Rush at the British Fashion Council or whatever, We had to do that to use our voices.
Yeah.
But there's a whole new generation now of young people who don't have to be nice to anyone to use their voice. And that's very democratic and really wonderful.
Yeah.
That's something I think is really exciting in the industry. Now, the difference is that when we first started working, all of us, it was probably more or less in the same decade-ish, wasn't it? When we all first started working, we also didn't get trolled in the same way, because you're not so being queer or different is within the fashion industry, you're quite safe in that way. You're not safe as an individual. Like fashion's sort of ruthless whether you're gay, straight, male or female, but it was a safe space to network and work. And it was all sort of filtered through editors and buyers and what have you. Nowadays, I don't think there is such a safe space, but there is much wider acceptance on social media platforms. So young people watching this, you know, I think they can think about what they want out of fashion. Do they want to fly around the world, go to parties? Do they want to design and use their skills for for a design house, for another designer, Stella McCartney, or, you know, Zara, God knows, or do you want to kind of get your message out there? I would have said most queer people are doing what we have all done here, which is sort of created personas or characters in a way to kind of break boundaries and put a message across. But I do think there's not necessarily much money in that. It's quite exciting. And we've all had pop stars wearing our stuff and what have you. And in magazines, it means a lot. But once you've done that, then you've got to go on and think, okay, what do I want out of this for myself? And I think all of us have kind of done the really busy bit and then sort of withdrawn to some extent to concentrate on the really important, well, you used that word, didn't you, Carri, well-being. Looking after yourself inside, and that's but I don't know if I would have, you see, I think I'm probably happier now having gone through that crucible. I wouldn't, it nearly killed me, but I wouldn't not do it again if I could. I would still do it again if I could, if that makes sense. If I could turn back the clock, I'd still do the same again.
Yeah. You almost have to go through it to realize you don't want it anymore. It's
part of development, I think, as an artist. You know, do you want the applause and the adoration, or do you want to do the work? And I got to a point where I want to do the work. And like Lolo's saying, I enjoy meeting the other creatives and the people who I partner with much more now than I enjoy seeing a rich person or a famous person wearing my hats. I'm pleased they're wearing my hats, but it means more to work with a creative in a safe space, I suppose. And I'm saying all of that because of the young people who might be watching this. It's really important for LGBTQI plus people to be in a space where they can express themselves and be safe. You know, I think that's really important. There's so much hate there's so much hate, but there's also so much love and support on social media. It's just they're living in a different world than the one I grew up in, for sure. It is much more accepting, but much more open to, I guess, kind of trolling is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Have you had to take kind of measures to protect your mental health when it comes to social media, actually? Because it's now something we all have to deal with.
Not me personally, but then I'm not, if you look at me, I'm not really kind of personally breaking any boundaries, you know. But Lolo is, you put yourself in front of the camera in that way. Do you have any negative feedback? Your camera, your thing's off.
I've been lucky enough to not really have. I've had a few things, but nothing was like too vile. It was quite easy to like brush away. But yeah, I suppose I've been lucky that that I haven't had that. Yeah, so that's been good.
I got quite a bit when I started moving into streetwear and the streetwear world, which is very different to the world that I was in with you guys in like London, like of young designers, and it did feel like a very safe space and like a real community and a family. But then, yeah, streetwear is quite different, and I guess maybe it is a bit more about commerce or like, and
is that about you being female?
I did get that actually. Yeah, I got that a lot. Yeah, every like, oh, that's really good for a female, or like, that's the best Nike shoe by a female, or like, or just questioning who's designing and thinking that there must be a man behind me that's doing this. and but also just because my stuff is pretty full on, so like especially in terms of like color and print, and like maybe a lot of people hadn't seen that, and so like on Hypebeast and internet forums like that, I would get a lot of abuse. But actually I quite like, I kind of was like, at least I'm getting a reaction. Like if there was a post of my work and no one said anything, that would actually be worse. Like I felt like at least I'm getting a reaction. So, but yeah, I didn't get personally trolled, so that would be a very different thing, I think.
Yeah, I was going to actually open it up to all of you just to ask a little bit more about well-being and self-care in your practices, and obviously, you know, setting boundaries with social media, and also just protecting yourself there is a big one. But are there other areas that you just think, you know, that you'd really want to suggest to other people, like watch out for this, or make sure that you really look after this, or other areas where you think the fashion industry could do an awful lot better?
I would say like a good thing to figure out about yourself, and this changes, but like, and there's lots of tests like online, Myers-Briggs, but figure out if you're an introvert or an extrovert, or in what situations you are introvert or extroverted, because those two personality types operate and recharge and energize in really different ways and communicate in different ways. And I think sometimes you can put so much pressure on yourself to feel like you need to be doing better in some areas. Like I know lots of creatives are quite shy people, and you have to network. There's quite a lot of public speaking becomes involved, and like practicing those things, you can definitely get more confident. You can build confidence. You can be introverted and be confident, but it's like understanding like when you need to rest, like when you need to re-energize, if that's on your own or around other people. I think if I'd understood that about myself earlier, I could have saved myself some trauma in some situations, or just said no to some things and just be like, that's not how I operate, I need to do it this way, and been like 100% effective. I think that's a good place to start from, like within yourself, to then like move out and know what to say yes or no to, or how to kind of manage things with other people.
Yeah. Julian, do you feel like you've like identified what you need and have managed to be express that clearly?
Oh, I really agree with what Lolo said there, and I'm still figuring out which areas that I'm introverted in, and like knowing when to be quiet and being just getting on with my work at my own pace is fine, and just keep, but also then finding ways to express and situations to be confident in. In my 30s, I was like drinking a lot and being very extrovert and stuff, but maybe that was really covering up an introverted person. So I'm still figuring those things out a bit. But I think it's good to just also listen to your instincts on things, and trust that if something feels uncomfortable, then it's not quite right for you, and go back to what really is the thing that you need to do. What's sort of almost meditative in a way, like, is it sewing, is it craft, or is it just sketching and designing? And don't do except when you need help in certain areas.
I think no is a very powerful word.
What's that?
Saying no to things.
Yeah.
Like I think especially when you're starting out, you feel like you have to say yes to everything, and you have to like, and I think that's something I wish I'd learned, and just that actually I wish I'd taken, especially with my my health condition, but for anyone, I just think, just know that this is a long game, and it's not just these opportunities, like they will come again if you're good and like I'm sure you're good. Everyone's so yeah, just believe in yourself, and just don't yeah, don't feel like overwhelmed or feel like yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah,
and keep and have like a plan, and just refer back to that all as well, because I think sometimes when things happen, it can happen really overnight in the fashion industry, and it can be so fast paced, and it's really important to take a step back and be like, is this what I want? Is this going where I want it to go?
Yeah, I have to keep a kind of a no list literally above my desk, which is, this is what you don't do. Because in the moment when you're given an opportunity, it's exciting, you sell yourself on it, and you do want to please people, and we're all so conditioned to say yes. But I now really have to consult my no list and my yes list about what I'll do, and I'm sure you guys have to do the same.
And also, don't undervalue yourself as well. Again, that's something, when it seems like a great opportunity and you've got to balance it out. Like, I think, it's got to pay as well. You've got.
Yeah. And what about you, Piers? Have you managed to kind of like set some boundaries? What lessons can you share?
No, I'm going to implement what Lolo, Carri and Julian have just said, and I think that's really good advice. I need to learn to say no, and to work out where I'm feeling introverted or extroverted. It is does feel like being carried away on a raft on rapids a lot of the time. I mean, it really does. I used to say, when I was making more I had a team of about 16 makers working for me. And I just felt that, and you can imagine when you've got orders like that, you spend out loads to get all the materials in and on wages, and then loads come in, loads of money comes in. So it really felt like I was driving this juggernaut with the back, fishtailing left, right, and centre. I felt totally out of control. So there is that thing of, and that was the no, I think, Carri. That was the thing I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be making all these multiples of the same design for all these shops. I wanted the money, but in the end it cost more to make more. So it was nicer to kind of reduce it and get much closer back to my my original vision, I suppose, which is kind of what I think all of us are talking about here, really. It's getting back to your original point. But I do think I had to go through that to work out what my original vision was, in a way.
Yeah, I can sense that you've all in different ways had to like bring the fun back and bring the originally what you got into it for, and then along the way you had to become public speakers, business people, but yeah, all of you have made like quite significant, in self-interventions to, as you put it, Julian, like bring the fun back.
Absolutely, yeah. Lots of self.
I'm sorry, what are you going to say? Go on. Sorry.
Self-intervention moments is quite definitely what's happened along the way, but it makes everything more interesting and deeper connection to and trusting what you can put out there, I think.
It does.
Oh yeah, so I was just going to say, I always just find it really interesting that fashion is one of the few industries where you're expected to be creative and good at business. If you look at the film industry, you have a director and then you have a producer. Like the creative is not expected to like do all of that. Or like the music industry, obviously artists have like teams around them that do absolutely everything, and management and record label and like, and even artists have like galleries and supports depending on the level you're at as an artist. But I just think, that's something to be aware of if you do want to go into the fashion industry. And it's okay if you don't know, but if you don't know, or that that's not your strength, to make sure you have people around you that can support you in that.
I totally agree. I think to team up with somebody whose job role it is to maybe look at the books while you go and look through the fabric samples would be a great way to start a project, a creative project. I've got somebody that I've worked with really almost from the beginning, and he's very helpful on sort of stopping me basically buying the most expensive version of everything just in case, So I think that's really good advice, Carri. Yeah.
I thought I might open up the conversation a little bit if there's any other participants that want to chip in with a question. Otherwise, we can just keep on nattering. Let's be quiet for a little minute and see if we can hear anyone.
I've got a question, please.
Hi, Dan.
Hi. And that's that I wondered, quite a few of you have talked about sort of finding your tribe, I suppose, or finding places where you feel comfortable and people you're inspired by, and either sort of working for a kind of mentor or somebody who knew the business a bit early on in your careers. Do you think, and training, I suppose, and accessing education and certain kind of worlds where they seem to exist for you, do you think that, I mean, obviously we're in a world now where higher education is super expensive, and quite a few of you have made the move out of London and alongside your different pace of life or making or creating, has that shifted your working balance? Do you think it's possible to get into it without going into that world? Can you make connections? I'm just thinking particularly with a sort of Kent focus, I suppose, like starting out.
I think if you're starting out, there's still, you don't have to be in London. So I know people who are from Dover and Folkestone who have been part of collectives which existed. What's kind of Dover called? But like Erin Hayhow, who's a sustainable fashion designer, has come out of that kind of collective along with Robert George Sanders, and they do like really interesting stuff. And I think it's like, in terms of finding the tribe, it's probably like there might be things that exist, like groups that exist, which but also it might be about like starting your own thing. I think sometimes you just need to do it yourself. DIY is a huge part of fashion, and especially when you're young, and that comes a lot. It's difficult. I was lucky. Well, I was lucky. It was different for me. I grew up in London, so there was just, everything was around me, and I went to school in London. But I found my tribe, so to speak, of friends, but it was through going out dancing. It wasn't through school, and it wasn't through work experience. It was definitely from kind of East London and partying and the whole scene which came along with that, in terms of the music and the look, and a whole kind of, a whole world which it informed the clothing. So yeah, I guess it's different for different kinds of areas, but I think if you can find a group, or even like maybe there's like one other weird kid like you in your village or your town, get together and just start doing things together, like start cutting up t-shirts and selling them in like a local gallery window or shop, or just be like really DIY, have fun with it. Make a soundtrack for the first thing that you make, just start building that world for yourself and showing it to other people, and then it just grows. I think it's just start doing, as would be my advice, just start doing stuff.
It's quite hard, isn't it, Lolo? Because when you're young, before you start, you look at all the stuff on the big Instagram accounts or in the magazines and what have you, and you think, oh, that could never be me, or I don't fit in there. It sort of all looks too polished and too VIP. And I know that I felt like that before I started. I kind of couldn't, when I first saw my stuff sort of being used, it blew my mind, actually. I couldn't believe what I was actually seeing. But I was doing exactly what you're saying. I was doing what I wanted to do in my own way. So I think that's really good advice, is just to start and just to do it. And young people you've all got phones, so you can do. There wasn't editing equipment when I was your age. There wasn't editing stuff. We had to use a camera. You'd have to send it off. You'd have to send the film off to the printers to go. So. But don't let the fact that there are other people doing it on Instagram or in the magazines better than you, in your opinion, don't let that stop you doing your way. I really think lots of people sort of feel like they shouldn't they don't deserve it, or they're not good enough or something. And that's the one thing, as a teacher, that's the one thing I'm always telling my students is just do it. Just do it your way. Doesn't matter. Don't compare yourself to other people.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think it's a good thing not to be in the city, because cities are expensive, and you can often get in like survival mode. And actually, I think it's good to be somewhere where you can just really grow at your own pace and really like find yourself and not have those pressures. And I think this year especially, I think because we've all spent so much more time online, and I think it's I think that we're going to see more creativity and more like people coming from, regional areas, and for sure.
Yeah, that's I really love that point about like survival mode, which is really, an anathema to creativity. And so moving out of the city or actually just bypassing that entirely can free you up and allow you to be more creative. Yeah.
And we can all network around the world, can't we, now with Zoom? So there's a whole new kind of digital fashion and CGI, this AR, VR. So I do feel that we're on the brink of I think we're already seeing the young people with a new way of thinking. I think it's very exciting, actually. It's much more democratic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think a really good thing to do as well if you're young is like just really like research and start figuring out, you don't have to know, but like what your kind of point of view is, or like what you're looking at beyond, like off your phone, in terms of like broadening it out, like outside of fashion magazines, whether it's computer games or films or permaculture or something, just I think that's what is going to really serve you as you move on in life, is when you have this kind of strong foundation of reference points and aesthetics. So instead of, because you're asked a lot like what inspires you, we're constantly, I think as creatives, always asked like what inspires you, what's your inspiration. And I was thinking about that today, and I was like, I don't know what my inspiration is now, but I know like where I come from in terms of what I was around and looking at, and was really kind of embedded in my DNA in terms of kind of references and aesthetics and sounds that still come through my work. And I think getting to grips with that early is a really good tool for the future.
I love that. The idea that actually what inspires you, a much better question is, where you come from and what you were steeped in. And that's a much easier question to ask yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any other questions? You might be all right.
Someone's shy, they can always put it in chat, can't they?
That's true. Yes, if there's a question you'd like me to raise in chat, then pop it in. Otherwise, I might just ask you just for our last kind of 15 minutes or so, just to, if there's anything else that you just think it would be really, really great for young people to know. We've covered a lot of it, I think. But
can I add another question, which is this might feel a bit boring to anyone who's, starting out, and the discussion has been so meaty and inspiring. I suppose from a question of industry support, I sound so corporate when I say things like that. But like, what do you think would be useful for you now, if you wanted, I don't know, a program or something that would, if we're thinking about, this is a South East Creatives funded event, what should creative organisations be doing to support sectors like fashion in places like Margate or Kent? Is there more to do in that way? Please don't take it down that route if it doesn't feel right, but just if it does.
What about things like workshops? And I mean, I think Margate Pride's a great example for sort of showing creativity off. But it'd be, what about, you know, like Notting Hill Carnival? They do all the, they spend hours, don't they, making the costumes in railway arches and what have you. And that could be an amazing thing to happen in Margate, and on the East Coast there is workshops and lessons and how-tos, especially for something like Margate Pride. It'd be fabulous.
Yeah, I think also in investing in, so I remember it's Future Foundry, which is in Dover, which is a great organisation, and they create these like makers markets, and they've been like at the Turner as well. So it's a really great way to encourage young creatives to start making and then give platforms to sell and to meet their audience and meet the public. And that's worked really well. So I think, yeah, it's, and the cycle, it's like Piers was saying, it's been workshops, meeting practitioners, then supported through their making. I think they're sort of given space, and then these markets to sell. So I think, which is kind of putting in a framework, a business framework, but in a way which is more about sort of encouragement and traineeship and support, which after doing that for a couple of years, you know, it might be that you can scale up, or it might take you into a bit of the industry you didn't know you wanted to do. Like you might go from pottery into special effects makeup because you like molding and casting, or you might go into upholstery, or like from making little bracelets or something, you know, because you just don't know the trajectory. And like we all go around on these kind of like windy roads of career, and they're very sort of cross-pollinated in terms of what you end up doing and who for. So, but yeah, so for, I think for like younger people and funding coming from outside, there could definitely be money put into creating these infrastructures to allow people to expand in a business sense, but encourage.
I'm really sad, Lolo, because I teach in Rochester in Kent at the University for the Creative Arts, and they're going to close that campus down actually.
Oh really?
Yeah. That's what they're planning to do, which is a massive blow for Medway and creative industries. And in fact, Margate is so many tutors and professionals travel from Margate and Ramsgate down to the university to teach. And of course, in the context of this chat, you know, the university is a safe space for young queer people to work and to find themselves, you know. So I can certainly say that sort of market and a workshop space or some kind of space in Margate would start to plug some of those gaps for the local community, but also obviously make Margate is such a big destination. The train is packed for Margate at the weekends. If you're living there, I'm sure you can really feel it when everyone appears in. And so a kind of makers market would just be such a wonderful thing, not only for the queer community there, if you wanted to have a kind of support for that part of the community, but also for Margate or other towns, you know, visitors.
I think something that I really picked up on, Lola, when you were talking about the Dover Foundry project as well, was that it's every step of the way. So it really is bridging the gap between just thinking, gosh, I might want to give this a go, to actually making money, like selling it at market. And I think that's really important when you're working with a community, is to build that bridge, because a lot of us, you know, as we've discussed, started out not really realizing, a lot of you didn't realize that fashion could be a job, that you could actually make money for it until you're a bit later, until you're a bit older. And none of us have particularly enjoyed the production or the business side of things.
And it's actually amazing just thinking about the Foundry in Dover, like from that sort of confidence building and exposure to workshops and structure, they actually launched Dover Pride from that initiative, which is an amazing thing, because obviously it's why we're here. So it's these things go hand in hand. You know, you get more confident with your making or your entrepreneurship, and you realize that you can do other things with friends and form collaborations and start big protest movements like your own town pride, you know, and that's amazing.
I've actually been teaching on the Young Associates programme at Open School East here in Margate, and that's just, I've done a lot of teaching, but I have to say, and a lot of youth work as well, but it has been so close to my heart, and it's such a special programme. But I think there needs to be way more, like, you know, it's a small programme and there needs to be a lot more opportunities for young people here in Thanet.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, you're in Thanet?
Thanet, Margate.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah.
Carri's there.
Does that answer the question, Dan?
Yes, I'm still here. Sorry, I had to shut my window, which is why I went. Yes, thank you. Super interesting. And great to hear about all the connections that exist in those worlds as well. And maybe there's something about sort of just creating more opportunity to open that up and have roots in.
Actually, just finally, I know we're in our last few minutes, but I did want to ask about the power of collaborating within a smaller, more localized tribe. So obviously, you know, in Margate, we do have a smaller community. Do you think there can be a real benefit in actually having a more closed circle and collaborating within a smaller number of people? Do you think that might end up making you more creative? Because in London, the world's your oyster.
I don't quite know what you mean, I'm afraid, Anna.
Okay,
sorry.
sure. So I can definitely say that for me, moving to Margate and having a fewer number of collaborators immediately available, completely transformed my career. You know, I made a film with a really good friend and a filmmaker, but because we were seeing each other every day, you know, we dreamed up an idea about the Walpole Bay tidal pool, and I actually I don't think that would have happened with a wider circle. I think we almost needed to be a smaller pool of potential local collaborators to make something like that happen. And
yeah, I think local's fantastic. And I mean, those of us who know each other from London, we were local in effect because we were all in Hackney, because otherwise you're going to spend all your time trundling backwards and forwards on the tube. So I do think having a little gang is a wonderful way of cross-pollinating and compromising and re-merging and putting ideas together. London, you chase your tail, I think, quite a lot. So spending time in a sort of at a slightly slower pace will let your ideas grow very effectively, I would say. Yeah, no, I agree. I think a lot of creative people do worry because there is that Stockholm syndrome thing about leaving London and your creativity taking a hit or your career taking a hit. But I don't know anyone who says that. I almost everyone I know who's made the move out to the southeast says it's been a wonderful thing for their career.
Yeah,
there's amazing things happening here, but there's less distractions in a way as well. You can focus, and like you said, if you're seeing the same people as well, you can build more meaningful like relationships and creative relationships. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there's less doors to bash down. And everyone's a lot more open. I think people in London can't help but become quite closed and quite guarded, and it's very competitive. So even if, like, I think you're lucky if you've got a good tribe around you actually in London, but in living here in Margate, definitely there's been loads of opportunity and really interesting collaboration that's come from it, totally unexpected. And I suppose, yeah, it is that local, informal, it's everyone, people are your neighbour, they're your collaborator, they're your baker. You know, it's like, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but when it does work, it's good. Yeah, it's great.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's probably a pretty nice note to end on. Thanks, everybody. I've really enjoyed chatting to you all. This has been great.
Thanks very much, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about Margate Pride. Where, when, what, who, how?
So it's on Saturday, the 14th of August. I've got that right? The date right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Saturday, 14th of August. It's going to be at the Bandstand, which is up in Cliftonville. So we've got a day of events at the Bandstand, and our big event is the Margate beauty pageant, which is going to be an amazing queer alternative pageant for the town, with everyone, lots of people coming and showing their wonderful selves. And yeah, I mean that's and we've got our art trail exhibitions around town. So for kind of a good sort of 2 weeks over the 14th, we've got loads going on in the town.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah, should try and come.
Yeah, I will actually.
Yeah.
It's not far. I live in Stratford, so it's just up on the train. It couldn't be easier.
Yeah. I think the last time I saw you was on the steps of the Turner, but it was about 3 years ago, I think.
Yeah, well, we've all been locked up since then, haven't we?
Yeah.
I just want to chip in and say a massive thank you to you all for participating. It's been really wonderful insights. I'm really glad we got to capture it as well. So hopefully we can share it with people who are interested in the industry. Massive thank you to Anna as well, and also Southeast Creatives for supporting us. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to meet
Been
you.
really on stories.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, Carri, Lolo, Julian, Mia, Alex, Dan.
Bye.